life.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to tonight's CYP Scrutiny Board. It's been, My name's Councillor Lonsdale and I am the chair of this meeting. Shall we go around and introduce ourselves so that everybody who is here, there are a few new faces, so everybody who is here knows who is talking. We don't expect anyone to remember anyone's names, which is why we have managers. But let's just go around and say who we are and why we're here.
Oh, don't stop me.
Hi, Mary Hodges, Principal Public Health Manager, and I'm here presenting item 2.
I'm Robin Jewis, Director of Public Health, and I'm here alongside Ken for item 2.
I'm Cecile Wright, Councillor for Arboretum Ward.
I'm Sakib Amin, Councillor for Blakely's Ward.
I'm Stephen Fow, Councillor for Alverston South.
Youth Man, I represent young people. I'm Alicia Ahmed, I'm the next FT.
I'm Mohammed Sir, you can call me Muncie, I'm the Youth Mayor of Derby.
I'm
Sharon Butt, the Director of Learning, Inclusion and Skills, Derby City Council.
I'm Nikki Smith, the Assistant Director of Children's Commissioning at the Integrated Care Board, which is the commissioning arm of the NHS, and I'm here for item 5.
Hello, I'm Helen O'Higgins and I'm Head of Children and Young People's Mental Health Commissioning at the ICB.
I'm Catherine Kozlowski, Councillor for Chadderston West.
Lovely. Well, like I say, everybody is welcome. We're going to have a really interesting meeting. We've got some great items on the agenda. As always, we have robust questioning, but always with an atmosphere of respect in this meeting. So, without much further ado, do we have any apologies, Linda?
We do, yes. We've got apologies from Councillor Torella, Councillor Patterson, Tracy Churchill, Gamal Nizza, Andy Smith and Matthew Trick.
Okay. There are no late items to be introduced by me. So are there any declarations of interests? Okay. So the minutes of the previous meeting, the 5th of the 2nd, 2024. Are there any changes, amendments, items that are concerning? Shall we take these minutes as read and accept the minutes? Excellent. Hope everyone is happy with that. Excellent. So, item 5, ICP Integrated Care Systems Update for CYP.
Thanks everyone. So this item is to give you an update on the integrated care systems, children and young people's health around wellbeing assessments and children's mental health. So I have a presentation which I'll pull up on the screen. Oh geez, got it. Okay. So I just wanted to start in terms of neurodevelopment assessment. So this includes autism and ADHD. So I came to Scrutiny a while ago now to talk about some of the actions that we've put in place to try and turn around the significant waiting list that we have for assessments. So the good news is that both referrals and waiting times are now starting to reduce. I'll put that into the graphs. I'm certainly not, it's still significant. I'm not pretending it isn't. So there's still over 3,000 children across the NHS footprint, which covers Derby City and Derbyshire, waiting for an ND assessment. But that is coming down, and the referrals for assessments are also reducing. So in terms of what it is that we're doing about it, we have changed the way that we deliver assessments to a practitioner-led assessment model based in hubs with some targeted work around triage and on the waiting list. We undertook a research project to help us get a really good understanding of what it was children, young people and their families wanted us to do, and the position of our waiting list, and some ideas about what it is they'd like us to do to tackle it. We've put in place the community hubs, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute. We've been supporting some autism in schools to support transitions. We are now implementing the Children's Key Worker Service, which is NHS England driven, around supporting children and their families with a key worker, particularly those around Tier 4 inpatient hospital admissions. We are coming to the end of our pilot for the emotionally based school absence project. So we're in a position where we're working with colleagues across education and social care to work out our place in the graduated response to children who are absent from school. And we've done lots of work as a system around transforming mental health pathways through both CAMS and BSM, which is the Build Sound Minds waiting list. And we've been developing the Derbyshire Emotional Health and Wellbeing website. So there's lots of additional resource on there. The autism portal in particular has some YouTube style videos to support families and professionals with information. There's lots of signposting on there for services that are also available. So I just wanted to share a little bit more about the community hubs, because this has been a really good example of where we sat down with the parent carer forum, some experts by experience and others, right in the middle of COVID, when we couldn't actually meet with anybody, and worked through what it was that families were seeking for us to offer support to try and control the referrals that were coming through. So they're now launched. There's 4 of them. One's in Derby City. There's no diagnosis required. It's open access, so there's no referrals. And it's run by the voluntary community sector in partnership with Health and Social Care. We're working closely with the Derby City family hubs to offer that support. So I think they've been running, probably coming to the end of a year now, and it's really been as much about learning what it is we need to do next as it is about offering the support. So as that's coming through to an end, we can start to work out whether we continue as is and how we develop them. Again, the family hubs are really starting to take shape and grow, so we're lining ourselves up with those as well, which is great. And then the next slide's just a little map to show you where they are. I'm sure you don't need to know. So the next slide then is just some stats around the community hub. So in Derby City, there's been 117 sessions since launch in September last year. We're getting some really positive feedback. It was really about children, young people and families feeling safe, feeling they were listened to and receiving support and signposting. So we are getting some really positive feedback, which is great. So as I said at the start, we've still got a lot more to do. There's still lots of children on that waiting list, and we're really keen that we keep going and keep supporting them and their families. So our focus really now is shifting more into schools and the community. So we are working with the hubs to work out their role in screening and triage and support to help us with those referrals. We're trying to ensure that schools are aware of the pre-diagnosis support that's available, and all the help that's there for them with children in school. And then we're starting to talk about how we can involve them in the assessment process at the earliest opportunity as well. For the majority of children, it's the school where the professionals who know them best are. So it's really important that we utilise that and really make the most of it. And then NHS England has launched some additional funding through they're calling it the PINS Partnership for Neurodiversity in Schools. So again, that really strengthens what we want to do in terms of supporting schools to support children with ND needs. So shall I pause at that point on ND before I move through to children's mental health?
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, for the statistics that you provided of the young people that have attended the community hub sessions, I was wondering if you have further statistics regarding their demographics, particularly if they come from deprived areas or there are certain areas that we need to concentrate.
Yeah, I don't have that to hand, but I can certainly look that out. I'm sure that will be the case. And I think part of the work that we're doing in schools is to look at, schools tend to be driving the majority of referrals. So what we've started to do is say, well, which school is it? And has that school got all the support and help that it needs? And I suspect when you line that up, it will overlap with certain areas that I'm sure we can. So yes, we're there, but
Councillor.
Thank you, Jan. Just checking my own understanding as much as anything else. So it's an aim that we want fewer referrals and the community hubs are part of well. Has the threshold been raised to get to clinical pathway?
No, threshold hasn't been raised. We did a survey of children and families right at the very beginning, and when we did that survey, a third of them said if we'd have got the help we needed, we wouldn't have sought assessment.
Yeah.
So it's really that third that we're trying to make sure they do get the help and support they need.
Does it look like it's still falling? I know these the data's looking good this year as well.
Yeah,
as far as you can see. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation so far. Well, the final area partnership for neurodivergent, could you just give us, because not all of us understand and constitute what is neurodivergent presentation. Could you just give us a descriptor? Perhaps it's not an easy. What is meant by
neurodiversity. Yeah. So it's a whole series of presentations in children. I think ultimately it's where children's and adults' brains are wired up differently, so they think differently. It includes lots of things. So it's autism, ADHD, fetal alcohol syndrome. I've seen, what was it I saw the other day? Bipolar was identified as being a neurodivergent.
Tourette's and dyslexia.
Dyslexia, dyspraxia. Yeah. So
well,
I'm looking at the clinicians in the room.
If it's become a catch-all term for those different presentations, how then do we ensure that we are focusing on children who are autistic and other presentation? If I'm just trying to understand the conflation.
Yeah, so I think when we think about what we're trying to do, so we're trying to support children, aren't we, to understand themselves, absolutely achieve the best they can and get, into their adult.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that we are that's for all the children within this neurodiversity group.
Okay.
I wouldn't like to say that we are really focusing on autism. I think the majority of the children within the group are within the description of autism needs or autism presentations, but yeah.
I think there's a move towards neurodiversity as opposed to saying special needs. Would be my understanding. Would that ring true to you?
Yeah, so diversity is about recognizing the difference. So it's not curable. It's not something that's treatable.
Not something that's wrong.
It's not something that's wrong. It's who these children are and how we help them to understand who they are and how we help those around them to understand who they are and make the adaptations and the changes and give them the support they need. Yeah.
Yeah, had another question. Slide 3, you mentioned the autism portal, and it's very well having these resources. However, I was wondering how we're going to go about promoting it. Are we going to send it off to schools? Are we going to promote it through social media? Just want to know the process behind it.
Yeah, I think all of that and the local offer, I think, is really important. Through our social media, we every now and again put it on. I think communication is absolutely crucial in this, and it's an area that we're quite weak on, I think. So getting the message out there is really important. Yes, I agree. We definitely need to do more.
Yeah, we'll be happy to. I mean, we've got the Derby Youth My Instagram, so we can happily put something on.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, that links to a question that I have about how people access these hubs you were talking about. Do parents just drop in? Do they have to be referred? What's the situation? How do they know when they're open?
Yeah. So they're open to all, no referral needed, no diagnosis needed. I think they do like to know you're coming, just so they can be sure that that they're open and that there's someone there to talk to and they're not overwhelmed by people just dropping in. I think, again, we need to share the contact emails and the posters that we've got around dates and times that they're.
Could you share that with this board? Because I feel that would be useful for the councillors and our youth mayors, that we'd all be very pro forwarding that agenda.
That would be great.
Knowing my fellow councillors, as I do. I mean, it will relate to something else. When you're working with the schools, are you promoting a neurodiversity inclusion or neurodiversity? You need to behave in this sort of way type attitude. Are you encouraging schools to create classroom environments where children who are neurodiverse can be themselves and not having to mask, rather than which causes more problems than it solves? Is that the sort of training that you're going for?
So yeah, it's absolutely about inclusion. I'm sitting next to Sharon. Yeah, and educating schools and professionals and families around what that means, about adaptations, reasonable adjustments, to support the children to be absolutely included in school. Yeah.
Are there any more questions on this bit?
Chair, in relation to your question, are the schools or will the schools get realistic resources to assist them? Because it's all well and good having ideals. It's not enough.
Would you mind if I? Thank you. So, Councillor Wright, the resources that we allocate to schools as part of if a child has an education health and care plan, there is an amount of funding allocated to schools to support them in making those reasonable adjustments and meeting those needs. Included within that is interventions from health colleagues, as well as care colleagues as well, social care colleagues. The way in which provision maps are developed, and you know, so you're an academic, so I know I'm speaking to somebody who lives this every day, and supporting teachers to adapt their curriculum sufficiently in order to support children is something that we are absolutely working alongside schools to develop further and enhance further, to look at curriculum, to look at workforce development, specialist teaching skills, that is in addition to that amount of resource that's allocated financially. We are currently above our statistical neighbours in how much we allocate, and we will need to, and we are in the process of realigning that so we are in line with our statistical neighbours. So it's an ongoing piece of work with all of our schools and all of our SENCO, our special educational need coordinators in schools, to think about how we respond, how we ensure we meet the needs. We develop a curriculum to meet the needs of children as opposed to a curriculum that children have to meet. So it's an ongoing, active, live debate on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Yep. I have a quick question before you move on. Sorry, we're all very interested in this subject. You say you're trying to reduce the amount of referrals into into diagnosis. That does actually ring alarm bells for me, because there are several cliff edges that neurodiverse people can fall off without some form of diagnosis. So say a primary school child will go up to secondary school and suddenly all that support, and because they present as they are able to mask, or they will a secondary school student will have all the support in place from primary to secondary, and then suddenly they're off to university and they don't have those cliff edges. What are we doing to stop those cliff edges if we're discouraging people for getting diagnosis?
So we're not discouraging people seeking diagnosis. What we're trying to do is make sure that referrals are appropriate. So a third of all referrals that come through for diagnosis are rejected because they're not appropriate. And so we follow NHS England NICE guidelines in our diagnosis process. We continue to follow that, and we always will do. So it's not about increasing the thresholds for diagnosis. We're absolutely not doing that. It's not about trying to signpost people not to come for referral. It's about making sure that those who really need a diagnosis are getting through, between the ones where there's needs that need to be looked at and addressed, but the help to meet those needs is freely available without them coming through a route that isn't appropriate.
Can I just add to that, Chair, if that's okay? So we are doing lots of work. There's a really good school of thought that believes that if you deliver an inclusive curriculum for a child being neurodiverse, then it's an inclusive curriculum. And how schools are very actively focused on transition points from early years to primary to secondary, along with ourselves in that conversation. And it is an ever improving piece of work. We haven't got there yet. And it's also really important to understand the difference between neurodiversity and attachment and trauma, and therefore meeting a child's needs at the point at which they and how they think, how they learn, their metacognition, their ways of engaging, emotionally regulating. If we consider all the different ways in which a child presents or a young person presents, and if we are able to adapt our environments accordingly, that will be a great place for us to be, because we will be meeting all the needs of children and people. It's a long-term journey. We've not got.
Okay, cool. Oh, last one. Yeah.
I was just wondering, in the autism schools, I was wondering what methods you do to approach that. So like when you're doing schools to like help kids with autism.
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest part of that is communication, and so really sitting down with the child and with those that support the child at school and talking about their presentation and their needs and how they're feeling, and then working through how they can work together to support those needs in school.
Could be as simple as adjusting the time in which a child turns up at school, because that amount of noise might be just too much for a bit of a sensory overload, to thinking about how lunchtime's accessed, PE's accessed, how breaks within a classroom time might be needed, where a child sits, a whole range of different, absolutely, whether or not they're sitting on with a foot rocker underneath their feet. The whole, there's some really easy things that just make a massive difference to children. So that were the types of things.
Are we ready to move to the next part of the presentation? Yep. Okay. If we're happy, we can always come back to these if we have questions.
Thank you. So moving on to children's mental health. So I just wanted to share the overall picture, really, first of all, to ensure that we're delivering the right support at the right time by the right people, which is really the principle of what we're trying to achieve. I think I just wanted to put the Thrive model forward as well, in terms of the aim here is to enable all young people to thrive. It's about getting help, getting more help, helping with support, getting advice and getting input, and really how we support them as individuals. So I did just put that in there now. So there is, before we come to the highly specialist CAMS services, there is a lot of help and support that's available through a graduated response. So again, the emotional health and wellbeing has a dedicated section to children's mental health. We have a 24/7 mental health helpline that's all age, and there are children's trained specialists within that service to provide information, advice and support as needed. Within schools, we have the mental health support teams, which is again a national scheme that's slowly being rolled out more and more. And we have the CAMS specialist community advisors that provide advice and support. We do have a documented pathway to guide education staff and others through the various support offers that we've got. So we've just dropped in the key strategic priorities there around the mental health support. Again, I think it's really about working together and how we develop the offer together to meet those needs of children and people. Children's mental health workforce, particularly the highly specialist workforce, has been a real challenge, both locally and nationally. So we're making sure that we try and build our workforce for the future around training and development. And we're really keen to draw in those with lived experience and youth workers as well. So in terms of the key things that we put in place over the last year or so, we now have, we've increased our COOth offer, which is a digital support for children and young people. You don't need a referral for that. You just go onto a website. You do have to register. They offer support directly. As I said, we've got the mental health in schools teams, which continues to be rolled out. The early intervention and targeted support service. So this is the one that's sometimes called Build Sound Minds, and that has we've continued to commission that, noting that Compass will be taking on the new contract from the 1st of June. We do lots of work around eating disorders, and that we've got a expanded offer there to support children, and again the CAMS eating disorder service, so the highly specialist service, has been expanded. And we've been working really hard with providers to achieve the national referral targets and waiting times for those. CAMS, we continue to develop and invest. We have reduced the waiting list to CAMS, but there are still waits, and we are still working on that, and that's going to be a key area for us in 24-25. So there's some more things that we've been doing on this slide. Again, we've increased our urgent care offer, and we've met the national requirement for access to support there. The paediatric unit, we've got specialist mental health support within the hospital, so we've got discharge coordinators and some mental health support workers there. We've strengthened our strategic facilitator role, so this tends to be where children are presenting at A&E and mental health crisis, and it's about all agencies coming together to support them to ensure that they get the help and support they need, and that we get them into the next stage of their journey as quickly as possible. So that team's now well established, and the key worker service, as I mentioned before, is up as well. So in terms of what's next, we've still got lots of work to do around prevention and ensuring equality. There's lots of work to focus specifically around that. We are hoping to secure some additional investment in the new financial year to secure some additional capacity and work to tackle those CAMS waiting times. And we continue to develop our eating disorder services. We've been looking at sufficiency of placement with social care colleagues and the mental health that we offer. And we're working across Derbyshire, Derby City, Nottinghamshire and Nottingham City, which is the D2N2 acronym, around some specialist beds to support children with the most complex needs, including those who are being discharged out of fearful hospitals. And then the young adult service, we've completed a pilot in Chesterfield, and we are now looking to roll out that service across Derby City and Derbyshire. So that's for children who are coming into adulthood and supporting their transition from children's to adult services. So I think that's kind of questions.
Questions from the floor? That does include other officers as well. We like to hear your questions as well.
Sharon?
So I noticed in the report that there's quite a big focus on CBT, which always seems to be considered like the silver bullet. Are we using other forms of like talking cures and things. I know that specialist CAMS thing is probably a thing, but I know for certain groups, that neurodiverse groups particularly, CBT can actually be a little bit harmful. So is that being applied as in an appropriate way to the appropriate groups that need it? Yeah.
You happy for me to
Yeah, I'm happy for anyone.
I think a lot of the transformation around children's mental health over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of sort of nice guidance around the CBT that was coming in, and I think that sort of started to lead a lot of the development and a lot of the transformation and a lot of the investment as well. So I think a lot of the way that we've progressed has been led by the investment that we've been given and where that's been directed. So you're right, there has been a lot of focus on CBT, and I think some of that links to, you're familiar with IAPT for adults, the psychological therapies, and so the early intervention guidance kind of linked as parallel to IAPT. And then the mental health support teams in schools, again, a lot of that evidence-based and the way they started that linked again to CBT. So, and there is a need for that, and that's where those services have been commissioned. But you're absolutely agreeing, you're absolutely right in what you're saying, that doesn't suit everybody. So there are other approaches that are being used, and there is also a lot of the practitioners are skilled up in DBT as well. The I can never say this very well, like dialectic behaviour therapy.
Even going to try.
And then, as has been mentioned already, a lot of awareness around the impact of adverse childhood experiences and trauma. So there's a lot more awareness of that and training around that. And then there's also, absolutely, as you said, we know that I think it was around 25% of the CAMS caseload were young people on that spectrum around autism, and so, as you say, the kind of strategies and approaches have to be adapted. So there is that very much that awareness, and that's an area that we've identified as part of the current CAMS waiting time plan. We've put forward a 3-year plan of what we want, how we want to progress with things, and one of the elements around that is around evidence base, because we know that we have strong evidence base for some of the psychological therapies, but that's not always going to be the best solution. And what we know, maybe anecdotal is perhaps not quite the right term. It's probably a bit more evidence than anecdotal, but that there are other approaches, like some of the creative therapies, some of the things like Lego therapy, and lots of other things that really support and help young people. And so it's really understanding what those are and how we need to adapt and kind of continue to offer the right care for the right child at the right time, and make those improvements. So yeah, more work to be done.
There always is.
Yeah.
So we've got about a 3-year plan to start improving and expanding our reach. That seems okay.
Yeah. Yes. Sure. Can I just ask, in terms of CAMS, I'm just trying to get a sense of what issues that office provision. Do we still have educational psychologists?
Yes.
Yes.
Where are they located?
They're located, sorry, Chair.
Go for it. Go.
They're located within the Learning, Inclusion and Skills team.
Right, okay.
So within my service.
Right, okay.
Yeah, part of the diagnostic.
Yes. Do they pick up children who have mental health issues? And I'm just trying to get. So, what's their role in relation to CAMS? Please.
So, educational psychologists assess the ability ageability and diagnostics for children's educational progress. They do not assess the mental health. They would refer to the relevant mental health practitioners in order for that assessment to be made.
Yes. So the CAMS, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, is I suppose more of that medical side of things. So it's led by psychiatrists.
Okay.
So there will be psychiatrists there. They would do any of the prescribing of medication, because obviously for any medication for children, most of anything for mental health would come under that initial and secondary care prescribing,
Including therapy. It doesn't.
and then therapy is different. So therapy, the specialist therapy for those young people with a moderate and significant level of need, comes under our specialist CAMS services. But then those young people who have maybe a more of a moderate or lower level need would be able to attend the early intervention targeted support services, which is the mental health support teams and Build Sound Minds. So it's the way that we've commissioned that from different parts of the independent and voluntary sector, as a commissioned service. And you might find in other areas it's their CAMS, traditional CAMS service that deliver the early intervention. But then they CAMS tends to, you'd have occupational therapists, social workers might be working, nurses, community psychiatric nurses, and CAMS specialist trained nurses.
Just to add to that, there is an advisory team that people can contact, professionals can contact if they're concerned, so that they can be pointed and signposted to the right teams as well, which is really good.
Specialist community advisors that are known as the SCARs, and there is they're linked to each of the localities across Derby and Derbyshire. And they are that bridge, as Sharon said, between the specialist services and then kind of community services within their locality. So they have a good picture of the schools, links maybe to the GPs, and it might be to voluntary groups, it might be other kind of locally based resources, so that young people, they might be referred to specialist services, and as we know, there can be a wait. So it might be that there's other support that's available whilst they're waiting. And the SCAR can help direct and navigate the navigator roles.
Okay, and any questions on the floor?
Sure. I'm just wondering, because it's a long time since I was at school, so things are going over in my mind. So what level percentage of children in education are we talking about that are being recognised or diagnosed as needing help, support, or whatever? I mean, it's an excellent job that you're all doing, but I'm just wondering what level of children, young people that are in education, are we talking about here across the board? Just a rough.
So we assess our. It's okay, Chair. We assess our. There's different ways in which we can have that. So our health colleagues will have the total number that are coming through age related of school aged pupils. We then have a different, and some will have a diagnosis, some will not have a diagnosis. And I look down to my colleagues for that one. We then have a different group of children who have an educational health and care plan, who are in schools, because not everybody who is neurodiverse or will have an educational health and care plan, and certainly not all with mental health challenges will have an educational health and care plan. So that will be known to our health colleagues alone. Health and mental health doesn't mean that there is a special educational need. We just need to be really clear about the separation of the two. So on that note, I'm going to defer to my colleagues.
So I'm going to be able to give you specific numbers off the top of my head, but what I can tell you is that nationally, there is a survey that that NHS Digital do, and they've been doing it since 2017. And what they found is that when they started doing the survey in 2017, 1 in 9 children under 18, I think it was, had a probable mental health diagnosis. And that has been repeated each year. And that the most recent survey that was done found that in both 2022 and 2023, it was 1 in 5 children and people under 18 had a probable mental health diagnosis. So obviously the impact of COVID, we know, has been huge. It might indicate it's starting to level off, but it's those kind of numbers. And then another really helpful survey that we've used locally is Derbyshire County Council do a survey to, I think it's about 3,000 school children, My Life, My View. And that came back with results saying that there's about 1/3 of school-age children were saying that they felt depressed. It's just under 1/3 around anxiety, and I can't remember the exact percentages for other areas, but it gives you a feel of the kind of numbers. And and a lot of it was linked to internet, fibre, kind of anxiety, and bullying, lots of different factors.
It's just one of my granddaughters. She goes to see her. I can't think of the right word without being disrespectful. It's out of school that she goes to. A specialist because she suffers with depression and things. And obviously, again, like I say, it's on two sides. Was at school, and there's far more social pressures on young children and people at school nowadays than there was when I was at school, which is a long time ago. There wasn't such things as what you ladies are talking about. So that's why I just sit here in amazement, really, at what you're saying. And I'm not disputing any of it, and I'm not saying that you're not doing a great job in what you do. And I'm just saying what can help these pressures to relieve earlier in a lot of these children's lives before they get to the stage of needing support, help, things. And that's just what I have in the head, rightly or wrongly.
And some comes back to what Sharon was saying earlier, that's that kind of whole environment at school. And there's a lot of work being done around the whole school approach. And there's a lot of guidance to school, sort of national guidance, and also locally around how schools, because each school is its own community and have its own strengths and areas where they've perhaps already developed and strengths they need to kind of progress on. So there's a kind of a framework, an assessment on. One of the links in the presentation to the education framework, and that helps schools to identify if it's something around training their staff in mental health champions. Is it around mental health literacy? So young people understanding, and you'll be able to tell us so much more about how it works in practice.
But adding to that, I think the most important thing is that we have 4 young people here, and we listen to what our young people tell us.
Absolutely, this is what I'm saying. I say I'm a long way removed from schools, I'm afraid, but what these young people have to say about it is as vital to me as what listening to you is.
Absolutely, and their voice shapes the work we do.
Yeah,
along with parents' voice as well. So we have to listen and look to this one.
Because he's right across the board. There was only granddaughter, and she actually goes to a private school. So my mum pays vast amounts of money to send her to school, but she still has to go out of school to see somebody to talk to. I can't. It's not a psychiatrist, but it's somebody to talk to explain the problem, but she can't talk to anybody else, basically. So I just like to understand a little bit from my own personal.
We are developing, Councillor, we are developing a new emotionally based school non-attendance, well, that brings together different educational options so that we can support young people at points at which they might need not to be in school, then to help them get back into school, and that's with healthy care colleagues as well. But again, that's very much dependent on its development on what our young people say is going to work for.
I think there's also what has our education system become? Culture, the competitiveness. One laments the fact that education is not within the total control of the local education authority. Had that been the case, perhaps as a society would have been able to collectively respond to the needs of children during COVID, because you would have had an infrastructure that would ensure that all children could access some education rather than having to rely on a mobile phone because their parents didn't have it. So some of it is structural. It's not just about the individual and how they react to them, but it's the structure that they're put into and what's expected of them, and the hyper competitiveness. It was competitive when I was at school and I was a success, but competitiveness in the sense of failure. So,
Yeah,
so great.
I think there's, often a lot of pressure on the maths and English side of things. It's maths and English, maths and English, maths and English. Just where's the art? Where you can still learn maths and English through art. You can still learn history. You can learn maths and English through history, geography, all those other interesting things. We need to bring a balanced curriculum back, in my opinion, but that's an opinion.
We have to bring education back into education.
These processes that the council are implementing, they're fantastic, but I just wanted to ask about how the adverse treatment of neurodiverse students by neurotypical ones is being handled, because obviously the misunderstandings of other students can really affect a neurodiverse person's mental health.
Sorry, that's a very good question. And actually, I'm sitting here thinking that's a conversation we need to have with people. To understand what's being addressed.
Maybe we should take that question and bring it back to this board in a few months' time, where assuming that this board is the same board, or that the next board will accept it as a report that you guys can go. That's something we can task you with to answer that question, because that is a brilliant question.
If it's okay with you, Chair, and my colleagues here, we will do it together.
Yeah. Smashing. Spot on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Any further questions? Well, finish on a really high point. Thank you very much for that report. It was very interesting. I don't feel that we need to make any recommendations. I think we should just, apart from take that one forward. And come back and tell us more when you find out some more, when we work with schools and things. So please come back to so that's our recommendation, is that we would like you to come back and tell us about what that affects, the relationships between neurotypical children and neurodiverse is looking like. Thank you very much. Okay, so, and we note the report. So item 6, school mental health checks and childhood obesity.
Just going to give you
Make it bigger by pressing the presentation. You can't. Karen can, but I can't read it.
You click on the slideshow.
Yeah, that's it. That's the button.
I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of the child health checks through the child's journey, through the life course of their school, and then also focus particularly on the National Child
measurement programme, which focuses on measuring a child's weight. So health checks begin. Another is pregnant. So antenatally, a health visitor will visit all women that are vulnerable and provide additional contact that will be face to face, and provide a digital contact to women that aren't vulnerable. And then we have a number of other health checks, which I think are possibly covered in detail at a previous scrutiny board. So we have a check at newborn, and that's within 10 to 14 days after the birth. And that's a face-to-face visit for all women. We have a check at 6 to 8 weeks, and that's face-to-face for all women. 1 year, and at 2.5 years. And those checks follow the National Healthy Child Programme, which is a mandated evidence-based programme that looks at child development. All those mandated and statutory visits are delivered face-to-face. And we have a really good uptake. So 90+% of families will be seen by a health visitor, which is more than most families will be seen by a GP. So it's a really good opportunity for a health visitor to assess not only the child development, but the parent-child relationship, and also the mental health of the parent or the parent carer. And if there is a need identified, then the health visitor will do additional visits to support that parent or the carer, and refer them into the appropriate service if that the need is more than a targeted response, if it requires a specialist response. Before a child starts school, the parent carer will be sent a health questionnaire, and that's to help identify any needs preschool, so that the child and the family can be supported in their transition into the school environment. When a child is 4/5, so that's when they're in reception, they will have a hearing, vision, not screen, and a hearing vision screen. And in Derby, we're quite unique because lots of other local authorities have decommissioned this element of the service, but we've continued to provide that screening programme that's delivered by our public health school nursing team. And they'll also have their weight measured, and we'll talk a little bit about how that's done later. And that's through the National Child Measurement Programme, which again is a standardised national surveillance programme. As the child progresses through school, there are further checks at 10 and 11 years. In year 6, they'll again have their weight measured, and at 13 to 14 years, in year 9, there's an intervention delivered through a model that we call the Lancaster model. And again, I think we touched on this at a previous scrutiny board. And that's a process, a universal intervention that helps to identify the individual's needs, but also looks at the needs of the school at a community level. And what that, in a nutshell, what that enables the school nursing team to do is to identify how they respond to an individual's needs, but how they support the school at community level. So they can look at patterns and trends. So for example, they've identified within a particular school, there is a need around sexual health, or it could be substance misuse. They can go to that school and provide a targeted response. And that could be through group work with individual children. So I wanted to focus a bit more. That was probably not sorry. So yeah. A little bit more on the National Child Measurement Programme, and particularly on why it's so important that we measure children's weight. So just to give you a bit of an overview on some of the key risks. So children living with obesity are at risk of ill health into adulthood, with 80% of obese young children remaining obese as adults. And this can lead them to be stigmatised due to their weight, which can have a number of impacts, including bullying, poor educational outcomes, and also their increased risk of depression, anxiety, and social isolation. And obesity also comes at a cost. It's estimated that the NHS spends 6.5 billion annually on treating obesity-related ill health, and the origins of chronic illnesses due to excess weight start in childhood. So if I can just give you a bit of an overview of all those complications of childhood obesity, and they range from cardiovascular issues to psychosocial issues and the range of other issues that are highlighted there. So what does it look like in Derby for us? What's the current picture and trends? So the National Child Measurement Programme, as I said before, uses a measure that looks at the height and weight of a child and then calculates what is called their body mass index, so your BMI. So your BMI is usually expressed as a BMI percentile, and that's usually displayed on a clinical growth chart. So you may have seen these in the Red Book that, as a parent, it will often take to many health or medical visits. In Derby, we use the data that we received through the National Child Measurement Programme and populate a dashboard to enable us to analyse that data a little bit better. So when you're looking at BMI, just to explain how the centiles work, if the child is identified at the 95th centile, this means a child's BMI is the same or higher than 95% of other children who are the same age and sex. And the NCMP, or National Child Measurement Programme, looks at children's weight at the individual level, but also at the population level. So this is quite a busy slide, but I think the important points to note are is the figure 1, the body mass index classification. And what that demonstrates is that for children who are classified as a healthy weight, their BMI centile will be greater than 2nd centile, but less than the 91st centile. Any children within that range are a healthy weight. Any children that are within the range equal to or greater than the 91st centile and less than the 98th centile are classified as overweight. And the severely obese are those children that are equal to or greater than the 99.6th centile. And just to note, like, as with many other services during the COVID period, so 2019, 2020, 2020, 2021, the Child Measurement Programme wasn't enacted as it was implemented in previous years. So the measures that we have for those periods need to be viewed with caution, really. So when we look at trends, we tend to look pre-COVID and at our more recent data in 2022. Sorry, I've just clicked into our dashboard. So I've just provided a screenshot of a slide from our NCMP dashboard. So, and this looks at the proportion of underweight, overweight and very overweight pupils by academic year. And we're looking at reception, which is those children aged 4 and 5 years. And if you look at the population of BMI category, so the dark green line represents those children that are underweight across the period. So we look at the period from 2015 to 2022, 2023, and that's a horizontal axis. The light green line looks at the children that are overweight, so that's greater than the 85th centile and less than the 95th centile. And then you've got the children that are classified as obese or very overweight, which is greater than the 95th centile. And there's some key points to note really for reception children. So during 2022-23, 20% of reception children in Derby were overweight or obese, compared to 21.3% in England. And locally, this proportion has been decreasing and getting better in recent years, with performance in 2022-23 significantly better than the England average. So what that means is in a typical reception year class of 30 children, 3 children will be living with obesity. So the trajectory is very positive for our children of reception age. However, sorry.
So when you're talking about the centile,
Yes.
when the health visitor came, she plotted the child's weight on a graph. Is that what you're talking
Yes.
about? Okay, just so I know what.
Yes, so that the growth charts.
Yeah.
The standardised growth charts that we've used for a number of years. It's 1990 that the growth charts were established. They're in the red book.
Yeah.
That the health visitor.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we look at year 6, and again we look at those classifications of underweight, overweight, and obese, we can see a very different picture. So during 22-23, 40.3% of year 6 children in Derby were overweight or obese. And this was significantly worse than the England average of 36.6. And the proportion of overweight or obese year 6 children has been increasing and getting worse in recent years, both locally and nationally. In Derby, while there has been no significant change in the proportion of overweight year 6 children in recent years, the prevalence of obesity and severe obesity has increased significantly. And I think that's the important point to note, that actually at that top end, those very, very overweight children, proportion has been increasing. And what we know is that within that classification, there's a higher risk of children, unfortunately, having comorbidities, so having those illnesses that I highlighted earlier on in the presentation, whether it be cardiovascular, psychosocial, etc. So just to give you a sense of the proportion, in 2015-2016, 23.2% of children were obese or very overweight. That's above the 95th percentile. And in 2022-2023, that increased to 26.2%. So that means that in a typical year 6 class of 30 children, 8 children will be living with obesity and be at risk of those medical complications that we highlighted before. So what this slide shows is that we know that there is a correlation between prevalence of obesity and deprivation. And this slide looks at the proportion of obese and very overweight children above the 95th percentile by school ward. So you can see that in Alveston South, 12% of the population are obese or very overweight, and in Oakwood, a much smaller proportion. I must not click on anything because it goes straight into the actual dashboard. In Oakwood, 3.3%. And if we look a differing picture for year 6, but same measure used. So Sinfin and Osmaston, 39.2% is the highest proportion of children obese and very overweight, and Alistair at 14.9%. And we can also, through our dashboard, look at similar measures for healthy weight and overweight, but we've focused on that very high category because, as we said before, that's where the risk of clinical issues present. So what are we doing about it? I think we've talked before, and our colleagues previously have mentioned the importance of the environment in which children grow up. And it's not just about the interventions, the clinical interventions or the prevention interventions that provide it. It's also about influencing what people buy and eat, expanding access to public sport and leisure services. And it is through that whole system approach. And I think this diagram illustrates quite effectively what a whole system approach is, and that actually we need to be tackling all of those things if we're going to be making a difference. So in Derby and Derbyshire, we have a healthy weight strategy, and we have 2 key priorities within that strategy. The first priority is around developing clear pathways and signposting to enable children who are already overweight or obese to access joined up and long-term support. And And the second priority is around looking at preventative approaches for current and future generations through the whole systems. The first one's very much about kind of what are we going to do about the problem now we've got, and the second one's very much about how do we make significant changes in the future. So attached to our strategy, we have an action plan that covers 2021 to 2024. And in terms of governance, we have a strategic multi-agency children's healthy weight group. That's a bit of a mouthful. That we have oversight from the Joint Up Care Derbyshire CYP Delivery Board. We have system delivery networks to drive forward those actions. And we have dedicated public health manager capacity. And I've just highlighted some of the areas of development for each of those two objectives. So objective 1 around supporting children who are already overweight or obese. So we have expanded weight management services for children. We've improved pathways between some of our universal services and some of our more targeted and specialist services. We have developed and implemented a safeguarding policy to raise awareness between severe obesity and neglect, and provide a process to support to refer into safeguarding where this occurs. We've implemented a pathway for children aged 0 to 4 years, recognising the earlier that we intervene, the better. And then we've also done quite a lot of work in objective 2 around supporting the whole system to come together, thinking about that which I illustrated earlier on, the whole systems approach, to think about what can every partner within the system contribute to this vision. And within that, there's a whole host of activity around supporting breastfeeding, improving healthy start uptake, which is supporting the poverty agenda. So lots and lots of activity. And that's everything. Thank you very much for all the questions.
Any questions?
Go. So there's a lot of criticisms of BMI. Obviously, comparing children by age and sex, that tackles some of the issues with inaccuracy. But even by like ethnic background, there's differences between weight of children. Also, with BMI, it doesn't actually distinguish the difference between actual fat and lean body mass. How are we justifying that this is the best way to identify overweight and similarly underweight children?
Well, BMI is the best tool that we've got, and actually that's the nationally advised guidance around what we should use. So we are mandated to deliver NCMP using BMI. That comes centrally, noting actually all the things that you've highlighted. So we do have data to show that actually there's very different BMI patterns and trends between different populations. But I think actually when that BMI assessment is taken, it's taken under the clinical guidance of a nurse. So actually they will be looking at that wider context as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really good question, but as I said, you know, it's a national programme, and that's the way the national programme's been designed. I think the important thing is as children move through that pathway, there are individual clinicians and as Kerry mentioned, the nurses, but also then within the weight management services, there's those individuals there who are working with families who will have that broader view. You know, it is a bit of a blunt tool, isn't it? But it's the blunt tool that we must use at the minute. But what we've got are services that wrap around that have that individual approach.
Thank you.
So, I'm wondering, what are the leading factors in obesity? And are we putting anything in place to stop the issue of the roots and are they declining?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
What are the leading causes of any factors of obesity, and are we implementing anything, putting things in place, structures in place to address them?
Thank you. I think that slide that I showed earlier on showed that actually obesity or being overweight is multifaceted. So some of it is about the environment, it's access to public spaces and parks. Some of it's about poverty, being able to afford the food that's going to be nutritious and provide you with a balanced diet. Some of it's about education, understanding what a healthy diet looks like. There's a whole host of factors that influence. Some of it's cultural as well. There's a cultural factor, and I think the whole system approach is about recognising that there are lots of factors, and actually we need to be looking at all these factors together. It's the environment, it's the school environment, it's about what's provided in school dinners, it's about what's provided in it is a very kind of complex issue.
Yeah, I think it's recognising as well that if you think back 30 years, the level of overweight and obesity in the population has really, really changed, hasn't it? And you think about what's changed, why has this happened? Because fundamentally we're the same people, aren't we? And children and families are the same children and families as they were many years ago. And what we can see is that the environment around us has made having a healthy weight much, much more difficult. And part of that actually needs to be managed and tackled nationally as well. We always know there's so much that we can do locally, but actually nationally, and just to reflect on the impact of all of that legislation had around smoking and what's changed from a smoking perspective. You'll have seen, I'm sure, all of the media around different types of foods and how they're marketed and how they're produced, and that's one of the key things that's changed. And the investment in advertising of those products makes any investment we make pale into insignificance, doesn't it? It's a huge industry. So we need action at all different levels in order to tackle this. So from our perspective, the strategy, we're looking at everything that we can do, but we're working within that environment that also needs some national actions around mainly around food and food production, types of food that are available.
That was like an example for like a scheme that we do to like stop kids getting beef, for is like maybe a higher issue. So like to stop it before it happens. So
schemes. Yeah, so we commission what we call our Active Schools programme. So that's a programme that works in schools where there's a higher prevalence of overweight and obesity. And they will work with the school to implement a whole school approach. So they will provide lunchtime activities, they will provide training for the teachers. And for those children within those cohorts that are very overweight, they will make a referral to a more specialist programme. So it starts off as a very universal, accessible programme for all children. But within that, so there's no so that children aren't stigmatised. There's lots of like fun activities. And then what it does is help to identify some of those children that might need a little bit more intensive support. And then there's a pathway for those children.
Thank you for that presentation. It was rather solemn. Yes, it's like a tsunami, I think. I do agree that in addition to what we do locally, regionally, that ought to be action in terms of our food and drinks industry, really, that are deliberately creating a healthy population, which has impact on our health service and other services. Can I just ask as an observation, there was no mention anywhere about children's dental health, as we know that young children are increasingly going into hospital to have their teeth removed. Is that also part of your intervention of dental health?
Absolutely. So in every service that we've commissioned to tackle obesity and severely overweight issues, it's mandated that there's also we can't separate the two. It's also featured within our healthy weight obesity strategy, and we have lots of pathways to support.
But the dental one is particularly concerned because we don't have enough dentists around, really. So that is something we also address within that. Those intervening measures that you have highlighted.
What we have done over the last year is to look at what we refer to as the standard operating procedures that the health visitors follow and ensure that the oral health element is really strengthened. So the health visiting team have had additional training around oral health, and they have a particular context that's really focused on, you know, how do your baby's teeth, and make sure that the family support them to register with the dentist, help them understand the impact of sugary drinks, etc. So to do that education and awareness with the family, we've also provided lots of training for early years settings as well, again to try to help them educate the families that they are supporting. So we give out free toothbrushes to targeted families via food banks and via health visiting. So to really try and strengthen that preventative arm. We do have a multi-agency strategic oral health steering group that includes clinicians, includes representation from the local dental health network, includes the primary care commissioners of dentistry. So we're doing a lot to try to.
And then
Thank you. We talked about a new pathway for 4 to 5 year olds. Can you just tell us a bit more about that? What does that look like for Chaddiston, the 4-year-old obese child?
So it's centering around the health visitor's visit. So if a health visitor visits a family and makes an assessment that child is perhaps overweight using the centile growth charts as I highlighted, then they have been trained to deliver an intervention, to deliver what's called a Henry intervention. So Henry is an evidence-based programme for young children. So the family could have that intervention first. If at the end of that intervention the health visitor feels that the child and family haven't made the progress that they need to do, they can then refer into further intervention, which again is evidence-based and based around the Henry programme. So it's the 0 to 4 pathways. Quite early in its stages, we focus very much on how do we support children at the 99.6 centile, because we want to make sure that those any complications due to excess weight are being managed appropriately. But we do have that pathway in place.
Well, it's useful to know that. A lot was about identifying, but then what, you know.
Yes.
Except it's limited to, you know, in public health, you can't control everything in people's lives, obviously. Is there evidence that the children who are overweight or obese at 6 are also those at year 6, at 4 or 5 rather, that when they're in year 6 it's kind of the same children?
Yes, it does tend to be the same children.
yeah, I think the challenge is that the measurement programme doesn't track the individual children, so we can't match one measurement at reception with the year 6, but we do know generally from the evidence that the older you get, and we know that if you get into year 6, then you're likely to also much more likely to have excess weight as you move into secondary school and to adulthood as well. So it's not necessarily all children that are overweight at reception will continue. But there is that I think, was it about 80% risk that you get.
So the Henry things, is that new? Yes.
Yeah, it's new. But we do have an intervention by GPs as well. So I think 14 or 15 out of our 25 GP practices are commissioned to deliver an extended brief intervention. So that's that's a very structured conversation with a parent or carer of a child that's been identified at the 95th percentile or above. So every parent that receives that letter from the school nursing team, once their child's been measured, to say, you know, your child is not at a healthy weight, will potentially be referred to a GP for a conversation. And again, that's using nice guidelines. So that's another opportunity to support parents, carers, and then from that intervention, the GP has options as well. So they have other programs that they can refer into to support the family.
Who wants to go first? You both put your hands up at the same time.
You can go.
So I think my question was like, from one part of Derby to another, just like, you know, a bus ride away, there can be a drastic change of over 10 years of higher living expectancy than, say, a more deprived area. I'm sure you know that these can be factors leading to obesity. And the statistics that you show that Sinford and Osmondson, which are classed as low deprived areas, have higher obesity rates than other less deprived areas. My question would be, what are we doing to ensure that good quality of health is being enjoyed across all parts of Derby?
So we want everywhere to be like Anna Street.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not culturally. Health-wise.
Health, 10 years difference between
Yes.
Alistair and those in my ward.
Yeah.
Life expectancy.
So it is about using our data. So using information that we have to make sure that when we are commissioning services, commissioning them proportionate, making sure that those areas that need more support are getting them. So those areas will have the active schools programme I mentioned. You know, when we were commissioning the GP provision, we were encouraging those GP practices within those particular areas to take on this new service delivery. And then we're working with our colleagues in those particular schools through our school nursing team to make sure that we're also supporting where we can. And it's also about taking it a step back even further. So I did sort of make reference to breastfeeding and how important that is, and the link between breastfeeding and healthy weight in children. And again, that's about understanding where that we have lower breastfeeding rates, initiation and continuation rates, and targeting our provision in those areas, and then also monitoring how good we are and how well we're doing in those particular areas. Impact.
Thank you, Chair. I think an important factor to consider when it comes to obesity that many might not think of is vaping. So as the threat of vaping looms over our young people, even though comparatively we're doing quite well in terms of obesity compared to the national average, vaping is becoming an increasingly important factor to consider. I mean, I've been doing presentations on community safety, local environment of the schools, and students, young people have been telling me that pretty much everyone or most people in their classes have been exposed to some sort of vaping, either once or regularly. So even though in the short term we might not see the impact of vaping towards obesity, even yielding better results, in the long term, it's definitely going to be a huge impact. So I was wondering if vaping has actually been considered as a factor when it comes to the future plan to tackle obesity in the city.
So I would say we've not got it linked in with the strategy, but what we have got is vaping is a really important key issue, and the work that's undergoing with the schools around, which links in very much to that work, the work with schools around other substance misuse and smoking as well. It has some real similarities, doesn't it? I don't know whether you saw the head teacher from the Cathedral School she was on the East Midlands News, showing some of the packaging that she'd found from the vapes. And it just really sticks in my mind because the marketing of those vapes very much targeted at children and very much to look like it was to mimic a children's drink that packaging was made. So there's a variety of aspects of our life, which we kind of term commercial determinants of health, which are things that are advertised and promoted, particularly to young people, and the energy, the finances that go into promote those and to design those things in a way that makes them feel attractive to young people. So there's a wide breadth of that work that we do link into it. It goes along with alcohol as well, doesn't it? As well as, you know, all of the work that's been done to look at tobacco smoking, to introduce the plain packaging, to stop the 10 cigarette packets, which people used to, you know, you could use your pocket money to buy because it was so much cheaper. All of that work has been done to control tobacco, hasn't it? So we've seen that really good impact that that's had. But we can see with vaping that there's a real potential to introduce nicotine addiction to young people through a different route. So we've got that work around vaping, and it is part of our tobacco control strategy. So although it's not within this one, there is another strategy where it sits. I personally hadn't thought about the link between the two things, but generally that link around commercial determinants and how products are promoted, I think that's where a really strong link is for me.
I mean, to further add as well, linking to Hans' points, with the areas like Simf and Osmaston, where obesity has been the highest in terms of prevalence, there is that correlation with vaping, e-cigarettes as well, especially in like areas like Alveston. I know with my old secondary school in Old Baker, lots of kids vape there, and if there is that correlation with obesity and vaping, then I think that should be a priority in terms of our strategic planning in the future.
And we're waiting currently. The bill's just been laid, hasn't it? I think this week around tobacco legislation and the vaping changes to that. So hopefully that will be coming through with that the ban on the disposable vapes, which are a little bit similar to those 10 cigarette packets and the cigarette vending machines that you probably didn't know that you could get cigarettes from a vending machine, but certainly years ago you could. So similarly, it's about making those really cheap and accessible versions of nicotine less available to young people and less appealing. So hopefully we'll move along that same journey around the packaging and the marketing as we have them with tobacco. But yeah, absolutely agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you. I just wondered, is Derby so bad in obesity? Because at the recent council budget, Derby puts 5 times more than the national average into the obesity pot. And it's 1.5 million when the average across the country is 250,000. But is Derby that bad that it needs that extra money? Have you got that money, or is it a slip of the tongue?
So I'd be interested to know what categories of spend go into that. From our perspective, if we think about obesity, we have our public health grant, which has got very specific categories of spend associated with it, and obesity is one of those. And what we've got, as Kerry's described, is some really specific services that are aligned to that. So Derby County Community Trust, our work with GPs around their referrals pathways and their interventions. But what we also have from a public health grant perspective is support for some of our wider council services. So thinking about parks and leisure services as well. So there will be an element of that that's not, it's the way it's described in that grant return that wouldn't actually be a service around childhood obesity, does that make any sense?
I mean,
it's how it's categorised in that return. So so the key services are that Derby County Community and the GP service. Is there any other admission service from us?
The other services are delivered through existing services that are already commissioned, and the services that I've referenced, so the services that are delivered in school and the GP led, significantly less.
It was just a question I was.
Yeah, so I imagine that comes from, you know, as I mentioned, that overarching support for some of those wider.
Some of them have been into it, yeah.
Around parks and leisure services as well that we support.
Can I just ask?
Yeah, please.
For children who are primary age group, is there a gender difference in terms of obesity? It's just as I have vision of primary school children. You're observing the playground, yeah? You're running the backwards and reacting. Is there a gender? Are girls likely to be more so than boys, or is that something you haven't considered? Because we know there's a class difference. We know social class, but what about gender?
So there's a class difference and there's a difference with
There's ethnicity also.
as well. I think those two factors are more influential
than gender. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about what provision there are, activity provision for girls with closing down the clubs and etc. Whether the the opportunity for girls in particular to get actively involved may not be as great as there is for boys.
And we know, don't we, at secondary school
yes.
that girls physical activity drops off. I remember it myself. I think this is personal reflection. So yeah, there is. So we do have within the city the physical activity strategy as well. That's looking to drive that physical activity from an obesity perspective. I mean, we do look at physical activity, and physical activity is really important particularly for your general health. The biggest driver is definitely what we take in. So the food that we eat. So yeah, it's both what we eat and what we do, but that food is the really important.
I have one question. Hopefully it's a nice light question. You recently launched your breastfeeding campaign. Is it having good take up? Are people being receptive towards it? Are business, because I know it's based in local businesses as well. Are local businesses?
Yes. So the Breastfeeding Welcome Here Awards, which is about encouraging businesses to develop their environment to be supportive of women when they want to breastfeed. That has been really successful, and they recently had a campaign, didn't they, in Derby and they have signed up a number of businesses, and our breastfeeding rates have improved, haven't they? That trajectory.
Really wonderful to hear.
But it's part of the suite of measures, really. So it's not just about breastfeeding welcome here, but it's also about when they want to breastfeed, both in the community and in the hospital. It's about some babies have a difficulty called tongue tie, which is so it's about providing a clinical intervention to enable that tongue tie to be addressed.
That needs to be addressed within days of I was a breastfeeding advocate for a long time, so yeah. But that is a good initiative, and well, that's really pleasing that already you're getting positive results. So, and obviously that is the start of a child's healthy.
We're kind of mid-table now with our statistical neighbours, so we're good. We're getting better. We've got a long way to go with our not necessarily with our initiation rates. It's our continuation rates where women need more support. But actually, we're not doing too badly now.
That's great. Okay, if there are no further questions, I think I will suggest, maybe not recommend quite, but suggest that we take Mohammed's point and maybe crunch that into your see how that works in your data. That how does vaping interact with this particular issue that we've been discussing? I think that's a really important thing, because it is a new thing as well. We all know about sugar, we all know about junk food, but vaping is so new. It's kind of hitting us from the side, isn't it, basically? And we need to really dig it into it properly. So I think that's a good, really good point. Are there any other recommendations people would like to put forward, or should we move on to the next item? Yeah, okay, item 7. There is an updated version of the report, I believe. Has everyone received that, or do they be? It's on the website. It's on the website. That's fine then. So, item 7, annual report on educational outcomes 2023.
Yeah, so I'll do a brief introduction. This is for the academic year 2022-20. It's always disconcerting when you talk about educational outcomes because you're always an academic year behind, and you have to place yourself back into that time scale rather than thinking now. And it's going to be really difficult when we do that as we talk through some of the outcomes. As we, I certainly think automatically about what's happening now and now different things are. So, and just a plea to bear with on the discussion and think about where we were a year ago almost, and it's important to place ourselves in that
Mm-hmm.
So really asking you to note the academic outcomes and continuing impact of the pandemic on achievement in the last academic year, and also to note the priority education investment area programme of work and the potential future impact that it will have on the areas of progress. So the appendix is really a detailed summary of the outcomes achieved from early years foundation stage through to Key Stage 5. You'll see that it's a mixed picture. It's a picture where we aren't reflecting where we were in 2019, and the pandemic seriously did impact on our children and young people outcomes. And whilst we're starting to come back from that, children and young people and their education settings and their parents are working really hard to make that change. We're still not really where we would want to be, but it is a really mixed picture for the last academic year. What I've tried to do within the report is capture some of the work that's underway, whether that's from the local authority last year, it will be different this year, but also from the work that schools have been involved in with the priority investment area and some of our focus work going forward. Rather than me detailing all of the information, Chair, would you mind if I leave it there and ask people if they've got any questions?
That is absolutely fine. Any questions based on the report that we've received?
Thank you for the report. It is a mixed bag, as you've highlighted, and as you quite rightly said, clearly pandemic has had and will continue to a degree a significant impact on children's schooling and their progression. I just wanted to comment on 7.1, just to highlight the absurdity of the paradox there, that many of the schools, or increasingly schools, are becoming academies, and by doing that, it means that the LEA is greater. The involvement of the control is lessened on the part of the LEA, but yet the LEA remains quite very much accountable for so many aspects of delivering a credible education service for our young people in the city of Derby. So I just wanted to highlight that and just to commend the LEA for what it does attempt to do in a very convoluted structural context.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I think I can't say highly enough the collaborative work that happens in schools. Irrespective of the structure, schools in Derby, the level of collaboration is something that I've never seen before. The engagement in working together, thinking about how children's outcomes can be improved, is something that our head teachers and our trusts are fully engaged with and engaged with us on. And we couldn't do any of the amount of work we do without it.
It's good to hear.
These are largely based on like SATs and exams and outcomes. Are there non-self measures going in place? Not everyone is good at exams. You know, speaking as someone who's not good at exams, it just measures one type of academic achievement. There are lots of types of academic achievement. How are you addressing so that we can take pride in all our children's achievements, not just the ones who are good at exams?
I totally understand your point, Councillor. The reality is, though, that the national measurement and accountability for outcomes are key stage results in examinations. It was interesting when you look at the pandemic years, even though not all children, as Councillor Wright pointed out earlier, were able to access equally remote education. The results that came through from teacher assessments were considered too high. Then that was through, in the main, very localised examinations, a lot of moderation, but not nationally tested examinations, and have been discredited by a number of people, which is to the detriment of the system. Children and young people work really hard during that time. So it's just an unfortunate reality of our accountability system. I think when we look at things like Progress 8, so if we take Key Stage 4 results, I think our Key Stage 5 results this year were quite impressive, comparatively speaking, and actually just showed how much our young people are working hard to get the results they want for their future. And I could talk next year about this year and some of the work that's been going on. So I know a little over. The gold medals have just been won in the chemistry Olympiad in Landau Forte. A group of young people have won a competition to go to Iowa on a robotics competition. We've got some absolutely exceptional, achievements, and our young people who should be celebrated for them. And so this picture really doesn't demonstrate the work that goes on, the collaboration, the application of our children and young people and our parents in that conversation as well, which is just an unfortunate reality. And if you look at resources, this doesn't give our statistical neighbours, which would give a better position. But when you think about resources allocated around the country in different types of schools where our youngsters are being judged against, then there is a level of disproportionality that we need to be better aware of. But it doesn't give the full picture. No.
I think what is in terms of these tests and these measurements, it's just the bedrock of our education system. It seems to be a case if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist.
But then we've got a group of, we've got 5 schools currently working with the Beckett World designers to design the the venue.
Yes.
And through a design competition, that won't be judged through
No.
an examination.
No.
But what an achievement for those
No, indeed.
groups of young people engaged in it. So yes, it's not. It doesn't show everything about what Oxford young people do.
So, shall we call it a night and let everyone? Yep. Okay, so, well, we've got one more item on our agenda. But thank you for the report. I thought it was very interesting, and I think we've come away. I do not think. Yes, the young people in the city have had a knock when it comes to, and the whole country when it comes to COVID. I think they are doing us proud, and they have come away forwards to, and they're so I think there is a lot of positive in this report, even though we're talking about the fact that they are behind where they might have been if they had gone to school at the same periods before COVID. However, they have done remarkable things. The young people of Africa, and we can be proud of them all. So we'll note your report. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming and presenting it. And we'll move on to item 8, which is topic review. The proposal for the topic review is to, and work programme, because this is our last meeting before the AGM, the proposal is to postpone any more work on the topic review and continue it next year. It's an important topic that we were planning to do, and now we've got officer buy-in and all that stuff. We want to give it the full opportunity to be pulled out. So, members of the board, are you happy with that idea? As this is potentially my last meeting as chair of this board, I would like to thank you all, everyone who has attended, or particularly officers, those who are here and those who have gone away and those who have been at previous meetings. It's been wonderful. You've given fantastic reports, and it's been a really interesting year for all of us. And councillors, thank you so much for attending and bringing your expertise and your wonderful selves here and keeping Scrutiny scrutinising and doing its job really well. And our youth mayors, I mean, you've really made the meeting, and our future youth mayors, we're really looking forward to working with you in the future. But if there is no further business, I will draw the meeting to a close. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.